to DJ Coffee Talk. Let's get buzzed. Buzz.
Morning, Jack.
Good morning. How the fuck are you doing?
Fucking fantastic.
Fucking amazing.
Another day at DJ Coffee Talk.
Yes, sir.
Who do you got for me this week?
Harlan Emil. Mr. Harlan Emil.
That's an interesting name.
It is. He's an interesting man.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So fitting, interesting name for an interesting man.
Indeed.
Cool. What does he do?
He had a background doing design, electrical engineering, and physics. He actually went to like one of the top schools for electrical engineering.
No shit.
At Georgia Tech. That's correct. But Georgia Tech's really well known for that.
Yeah.
Went there for electrical engineering. His background in physics, very science heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually ended up working for a design firm called Sight, based out of New York.
Sight.
He's working with them, but then he launched an independent career in 1987. And he started kind of combining his interests in design, electric engineering, and physics, more oriented toward, his passions, what he cares about, which is ultimately, creating ecologically sustainable human habitations.
Okay.
Which, is a different type of venture maybe than some development, architectural development like companies might be focused on.
Right.
It's, different motivations.
It sounds like you started the professional route and kind of went rogue. I can respect that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he kind of pivoted off a bit, but, moved into things that were more aligned with what he cared about and what he believed in.
Which I feel like that's got to be the ideal path for people, right?
Yeah.
Learn the skills and then branch off and do something that you're passionate about with those skills.
Yeah, have the hard skills and then, go off and use those tools, like you're saying, for something that actually aligns with your deeper seated values and beliefs.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
You pitched him as somebody interesting, though. What do you mean by that?
So he, his overarching goal is to use his artwork and technology to elevate human consciousness. That way we change our perspective on reality.
Okay.
Yeah. He started doing that more extensively in 2004. He would create these large-scale portal sculptures.
Mm-hmm.
And then those activate, in his opinion, as kind of portals to the new Earth, which his idea of the new Earth is an Earth that, I'm referencing my notes here, is where all human beings live in sacred and divine harmony in their way of life and with all life.
Sounds incredible.
Yeah, and all life would be, people, all forms of consciousness, and really being connected to the Earth as opposed to against it.
So I'm trying to understand. So these structures that he builds is supposed to transport people into that type of new Earth, or move people along, or
it's supposed to elevate their consciousness while they're sitting within it. And he uses something called I might be stating it wrong based off of the research I've done as of now, a quasar something disruptor.
Okay. But
it changes the frequency at which you're living at while you're in it, and then you change your perspective on things. I have a lot of questions for him.
Yeah.
Being philosophically grounded.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes intellectual with how I view things, and I see some logical questions that I have regarding all of this. Not saying I don't align with him on a lot of his beliefs, but just to kind of bring some clarity as to what he's talking about and how those things, what his methodology and philosophy is on how those things alter our perspective on consciousness and alter our perspective as human beings.
Yeah. So it sounds like an interesting guy. Do you think he'd be a good fit for the podcast?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think our viewer base would really appreciate. Correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, but would appreciate having a different perspective. This is a dude that goes to a lot of festivals. He has art installations throughout the country. Mm-hmm. It's internationally recognized. And he talks about some ideas that are very, mind expansive.
Yeah.
And I think, our viewers would appreciate that. We actually met him at Gem and Jam. Initially, our friend met him at Gem and Jam here in Tucson.
Okay. So he goes to a bunch of different type of festivals. Yeah. So people might actually run into this guy at a music festival.
Yeah, highly likely. Yeah. I know he was at Joshua Tree.
Okay.
Relatively recently.
Yeah.
We were messaging back and forth, and he was saying he had a trip there. He was there for the winter solstice.
Mm.
He was setting up an event there. So I'm sure people in the raver community or in the EDM community may have already seen Harlan before. So
cool. Maybe not know the backstory. Yeah. maybe not know the backstory of him.
Yeah, and how he goes about it. He does have a website, even has a book releasing called Portal to the New Earth, which explains his whole philosophy and methodology as to how he's opening this portal to the New Earth with like-minded people.
Dope.
But I think it'd be, really a nice conversation to archive on this platform.
Yeah. What would we look forward to with your conversation with Harlan?
Talks about how geometry and art influences consciousness.
Sounds pretty fucking cool.
And then his whole, top floor, the most abstract level of what that means, all the way down to how, when he's what he would call in third dimensional consciousness, living 3D, how that goes from 3D all the way up to, or like, base level all the way up to the top floor. If that makes sense. Base level being, what he's doing on the day to day.
Yeah.
And how that relates to that overarching shining mission at the top of that tower.
Okay. Anything else need to know about this guy?
I think the interview is going to be a joy to do, and he's going to have a lot of perspectives. And I think that's it. I'm just excited for people to take a listen to it.
Cool. All right, fuck it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right.
Cheers. Harlan is doing a project called Portal to the New Earth, where he is creating portals that are designed to lift human consciousness to a higher frequency. He does that through, creative art installations that combine geometry, chakras, the Earth's geometry, and he really goes, in depth with that to help us elevate our consciousness. And he'll talk more to that when we talk together today. First and foremost, thank you for being on the show. It's awesome to have you here. Can you tell us a bit, or tell our viewers a bit about who you are, how you got into the Portal to the New Earth project, and a little bit of your background as a person?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on the show today. And that was a pretty good introduction about the one of the main focuses. So, I started building portal installations for Burning Man. I started going to Burning Man in 1999 and seeing these big art installations out on the desert there. So in 2004, I built my own art installation that I called the Diamond Portal, which, I guess we could pull up an image of that. Should I do that right off the bat? It's a good place to jump in. I think, you'll have to let me share the screen. And
Definitely.
So, I make these portal installations that, like you said, use sacred geometry. They use colors that relate to the chakras and also sound. I'm a bass player, and I came up with this device, we'll talk about it a little more later, with the quasar wave transducer that vibrates all of these sculptures with low frequency feedback to activate the piece and to get people to go into like a meditative state. And like you said, it's for this, what I consider like the evolution of consciousness or shifting consciousness, or I call the portals a key to shifting the earth into the next vibrational dimension. So let me get this slide up, and we'll start from, let's see, is this going to work? Okay. Oh boy. Except for then, this is really frustrating because if I do that, it's hard to share the screen. And then, it's this one. It's going to be.
There we go. We got it. All right. For people just listening to audio, Harlan just pulled open a slideshow presentation for us where he goes into each of his art installations.
And then of course, I need to, jump. Okay. We're going to play from right here. You can see the Diamond Portal, which was based on this golden ratio and this green heart chakra color. And as you see, and it was vibrating, so people could go inside of it and feel these vibrations. And it was placed on the Burning Man playa layout at 11:11. So that was kind of a key to the activation. Was like it's 11:11 Diamond Portal to be this key for shifting the earth into the next vibrational dimension. So this was in 2004 at Burning Man, and I've been building these pretty much every year since at Burning Man, and I'm working now on the latest piece that'll go out to the playa 2022. It was actually going to be there for 2020, and with the lockdown and everything being canceled, we then it got postponed until this year. And so let's see, I'm going to just stop the screen share just in case we need to go to something else. But we want to really answer your question, though. My whole life, I've been kind of like tuned in. It's not like a lot of people are like waking up now to the fact that the earth has kind of been co-opted or controlled. But, ever since, I'm a teenager, I've kind of seen the earth and the world from a different perspective. And even this diamond portal, I designed the shape of it while I was studying design back in 1984 when I was in my 20s and living in New York City and went to Parsons School of Design. And the reason why I was studying design is more because I'm interested in the design of future cities and future environments that are in harmony with nature. And that's actually the ultimate goal of what Portal to the New Earth is. I mean, clearly I've been building for, these portal installations. I call them portals, and that's where the name portal comes from. But it's not so much about making these installations or people experiencing them to have this evolution of consciousness. But it's like once people do wake up to this evolved consciousness, we'll see how we live on planet Earth and interact with everything in a different way. And we would want to design and build our environments, our communities to be in harmony with all life. And it would look very different than the Western consumer-based culture that we live in now, living in suburban tract homes spread out. And, I lived in New York City most of my life, which is a very urbanly dense city, but it still has most of the areas for cars and streets and parking. And we could live in these urban eco-villages that are much more similar, like the festivals, Burning Man and other festivals that I go to, which are they're temporary, but, anywhere from 5 to 50 or 80,000 people at Burning Man live in this very dense urban area. And that's because it's culturally rich. But the idea is to be able to create our full-time environments that are, beautiful, harmonious, sustainable, that are in harmony with the earth. So that's a long answer to that first question, but let's keep moving ahead.
No, definitely. I think it was a fantastic answer to the first question, though, because it gave us an understanding of, your mission, your philosophy, what you're aiming at, and I think that's very valuable to hear. What do you think is, so in your opinion, is it because we're operating at a low vibration of consciousness? Is that a large influence for why we build our architecture in the way we do? And then do you feel like our architecture is a reflection of, how we view our relationship with our environment? Because the way I understand it is, quote, hopefully I don't say this wrong, but our archaeological architecture is it's more symbiotic with the environment and it's more locked in with it. And do you think currently with how we function, our level of awareness around our environment, we create, modern suburbia and this consumerism and this detachment from nature?
Such a good question as to, why I need to or build these things, why there's the idea to shift or elevate or, evolve consciousness. What's wrong with the way our consciousness is now? What's wrong with the way the world is? And, there's different ways to perceive that or understand the situation that we are as humanity on it right now. I hope that we're coming through clearly. Yes. Oh boy. Current consciousness and build in the Western world, our civilization, is definitely from a limited lower consciousness, like you point out. And it's really, obviously causing great detriment. We see the detriment to the earth with all the pollution and all these negative effects of humanity. And even, just our style of building our cities and our suburban homes, clearly is not done in the most conscious way possible. And so that's what I'm addressing, is this issue of our current state of the way we design and build on the world, and to try to see it evolving where we see all of life, the earth, water, and everything as part of life itself, and want to build the most sustainable and sacred way, not just for the benefit of humans, but for the benefit of all life. And so there has been an underlying agenda that seems that humanity has been co-opted and controlled to a certain extent that has caused this negative way of inhabiting the earth. And we go into so many different details, but just look at the way we do agriculture, or the way we do mining, or the way that we're extracting oil to great harm to the earth and things like that. And to be able to shift from seeing the earth as just a resource to be used and destroyed to seeing it as like our own body and revered, and what we work with it in the most sustainable and sacred way is what the intention of these portals that I build is to help to evolve our consciousness to that level, and also to kind of wake up to what one of my friends who I work with will call the false matrix, that our consciousness has been locked into a 3D false matrix, which is very disconnected from our multidimensional and higher dimensional self. And so the idea of the portals is to then reconnect us to our higher dimensional consciousness, higher dimensional self.
So it's kind of connecting us to numerous planes of existence as opposed to just being trapped within a 3D model. That's kind of how I understand what you're saying. And it's introducing us to many planes of consciousness and many planes of existence that are always accessible to us, that we choose not to resonate with them, or we're not able to resonate with them because we're blind to it.
Right. And there's even been an agenda to keep us blind to that for a good, a good part of the way our current civilization is working with our education systems, all these things, really disconnected mindset, and then when you are locked into it, though, it's difficult to even comprehend or understand what these multidimensional or higher dimensions and higher consciousness is. It's so if you try to explain that to someone which has no clue or understanding of it, and so even with my pieces, I use all these different geometries. I use, and I create these environments, and you don't really need to understand what they are. And the hope and intention is by just interacting with them and sitting in these and feeling the vibrations of the sound and seeing the colors and being in this space, it will help to be like a key to unlock and connect to this higher consciousness that is kind of taking place anyway on the earth at this time now. So it's kind of just, in conjunction with this wake taking place.
And do you feel the intellect has a big part to do with us disconnecting from our environments and having a symbiotic relationship with the earth, and that's the part that's susceptible to getting manipulated? And do you feel like a lot of the work that you do is to drop people into their hearts, so that way you're not as confined to the intellect, and that creates the boxes, is kind of the process?
That's, again, great question. And yes, you use the word intellect, which is kind of synonymous with being mental or in the mind. And they're actually part of this control paradigm is a form of mind control, which locks the intellect, the mind, into this 3D paradigm. And so therefore, a lot of times it's like some of the smartest people, like all of the Ivy League, Harvard educated people, are the ones most susceptible to being locked into the mind and not being able to see this. And then you brought up the concept of dropping more into the heart. And many of my pieces are all about the heart chakra and activating the heart chakra, or the higher heart chakra. And when you're in your heart, it's definitely very different than being in the mind or the intellect. And it is trying to get out of that to then see and connect into our bodies, connect to the earth through our hearts. And there is even talk that in our hearts is like the singularity, the black hole that Nassim Haramein talks about in the Resonance Project. And we can measure from our heart this electromagnetic field that is extremely strong, and that they don't know how or why it's created. And Nassim Haramein, the Resonance Project, talks about it being the idea that there is this actual singularity or black hole that's resonating in our heart. So big key to this evolution and shift is to be able to get out from the mind control, get out from the mind, connect into the heart. And the portals definitely are intended to be these. I don't know what you missed of that answer. It was a good answer. Sorry.
That was a good answer. I heard it. I heard all of it. It just broke at the end. I was listening to one of your videos off of your Portal to the New Earth YouTube channel. You were talking about, I think it was a presentation you were giving at a school or a lecture. but you were referencing a book where they talk about a heart chakra that covers the whole earth. Like it's like a universal heart chakra. That might not be the right word, but a planetary heart chakra that everybody interfaces with. Can you talk a bit about that and what that is, and kind of help us get a better understanding of what that is and how your work relates to that global heart chakra?
Yes. So the very first portal that I built, which we showed the image, is the 1111 diamond portal. When I first built it, I didn't think about the color being green as relating to the heart color I had seen in a vision, and I just decided to make it that color rather than, at first I was thinking maybe I'm painting it black like the monolith in 2001. I thought that would be hot and dusty. So I chose this green. And the whole shape, though, when it was built, actually made this heart shape opening. And the whole thing was all about the heart chakra, and that it was golden ratio. And there's this thing called heart math that talks about when your heart waves are in golden ratio, you're in coherence. And so it was really interesting. I built it for 2004, brought it back to Burning Man 2005, and realized how it's so much about activating the heart chakra. And in 2005, I burned it at the end of Burning Man. Like not all of the art gets burned. My friend, I wasn't going to burn it, but my friends insisted that I burn it rather than bring it back. And then someone else who had seen it was like, well, are you going to build more portals? And if you do, would you think about placing them on sacred sites or PowerPoints on the Earth? And I had studied a really great book that talked about the Earth's energy grid. Back in 1987, this incredible book called Anti-Gravity and the World Grid was published, and I bought it right when it came out. And it was a collection of essays by various different authors. And one of the best essays in that book was by this author, Richard Levitin. So now jump forward. It's 2005. The diamond portal was burned and is gone. And I'm starting to think about building more portals and placing them on sacred points. So I research books on the Earth's energy grid. And lo and behold, published right then, 2004, a book called The Emerald Modem, A User's Guide to the Earth's Interactive Energy Body. And this book is so key and crucial in the development of my portal installations, in that exactly what your question was about. On the cover of it, it shows a green cube surrounding the whole Earth. And this author, Richard Levitin, explains that this whole book about researching the Earth's interactive energy body, it's not a science, and he didn't do it like empirically, like, an archaeologist might do or something like that to research sites. He did it through meditations and intuition, working with higher dimensional beings that he contacted through his meditations that gave him all this information. So there's kind of a disclaimer at the beginning of the book explaining that if you want to verify the information, he explains the meditations that he did to access this level of consciousness. And so then one of the very first keys he points out is that the entire Earth is surrounded by a green cube that's not sitting like flat 90 degrees, but pointing up and down like these, the points of a cube up and down. And that is like the totality of the Earth's energy body. But there's also a green cube within every human's heart chakra. And it's a way to connect through your own heart chakra to the totality of the Earth's energy body through this geometry of a cube. And so I thought, wow, that relates so much to what I was doing with the diamond portal being green and heart chakra based. So the very second portal in the evolution of the portal installations was the emerald portal. That was a green cube pointing up, and that was then just deconstructed into this cube, which here I'll quickly and hopefully very effectively share the screen with this one and see if this works out. So we could see the, let's see. No. Oh no, that didn't work. Oh, geez. Where am I? Oh, I see what's happening. Well, you know what? This is a little too frustrating, and I should be much more adept at this, but I don't see how I can now show the actual image that I wanted to show while I'm sharing. It does something really weird. So I know. What I need to do is have a different format of sharing. Well, So anyway, moving right along, taking a cube and deconstructing it into this new portal installation that was then, shared at Burning Man, and a way to then, go inside of this space of the cube to connect to your heart chakra and through the colors as this key to shifting and aligning to this evolution of the Earth's energy body. And so what I will do then is this book was so amazing that after reading the entire book, it informed the next, that was 2006 for Burning Man. It was the Emerald Portal that went to 1212 on the layout of Burning Man. And so for the next year, I decided to make, through this book, The Emerald Modem, he talked about these features on the Earth called etheric blue dishes. And they were these, they're etheric, they're not physical, they're blue in that they collect energy from the blue sky and from the heavens and distribute them into the sky and into the Earth. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to make a big sky blue dish that you could go into at Burning Man, that you would feel like you're floating in the sky? And then in the very center of this dish, I felt like, well, it'd be a big open hot space. You need to have something in the center that you can inhabit. And towards the end of the book, The Emerald Modem, he talks about the Earth's energy body evolving from the current forms of the platonic solids to a new form that's a combination of both an icosahedron and a dodecahedron called an icosahedron. So I built all of these geometries in the center of this big sky blue dish that you could go inside of this icosahedron that's had these mirrors on the triangles of it. And so that was the third in the portal installations for 2007 at Burning Man and it moved then to 111 on the Burning Man layout, and it was very far out. So when Burning Man, is this huge, crazy city of all these people building and doing all this stuff, and I always like to place my installations as far away from it so that you go out to the deep playa and you look back at the city and it's more peaceful and serene. And so this piece, the 111 Sapphire Portal, was placed, as far away, almost out at the very perimeter fence, big 60-foot diameter, 10-foot high sky blue wall that then you went inside and there was sky blue carpet and there was these nested geometries in the center that you can inhabit. And that's when I came to understand the concept of these portal installations being these multidimensional vibrational energy body alignment tools, in that it was a space to be able to align your vibrational energy body to the evolution of the Earth's energy body. And of course, I had this quasar wave transducer, which we mentioned earlier. It's been in all of the portal installations. And what it is it's two bass guitar strings mounted directly to the speaker cabinet, or if not on the speaker cabinet, to a tactile transducer that's then feeding back their own sounds into themselves. And because the strings are tuned to subsonic notes, I've never actually measured their frequency. So I tune it intuitively, and I get the sound to be a random kind of feedback that builds up and dies down over time. So it sounds like a cat purring. And so it's this very low frequency purring vibrations. And it also, because it's so random and chaotic, it's stop and change and just start to go into these random pulsations. And that's a real key to the experience of these portal installations.
It's almost meditative, would you say? Kind of like it helps you drop into that meditative state through those low vibrations.
Most people find it soothing and meditative, and that is absolutely its intention. There's a very small percentage of people that they find it very annoying and can't be around it, but it's extremely small. And it's kind of, maybe I shouldn't even mention that does happen, but I mentioned it. But for the most part, yes, people do find it. And some people are like, it can be really draw you in. And then some people even to the point that they seem to be able to affect it directly through their meditations. So yeah, that is the intention. And also there's several other ideas behind this quasar wave. One is that it is in the range of the Earth's Schumann resonance. It's also in the range of brainwave frequencies. So it may be like tuning in and resonating. And a lot of times people will say, how do you get the sound of the Earth? They feel like this quasar wave is actually reproducing like a Earth kind of vibration. But another key aspect of this sound is that all of the geometries that I use are actually representing vibrational energy patterns, even though they're built out of solid physical static structures. So the quasar wave transducer is kind of inferring that these geometries are vibrational energy patterns. It's like symbolizing that aspect of the geometries. So it's a multifaceted thing. It's to be conducive to meditation. It's in the range of brain waves, the Earth's resonance frequencies, but also signifying that all of the geometries are vibrational energy patterns.
Okay. And I know it's kind of you building it from the bottom up. I know you were going into, these hedrons and the dodecahedrons and within your work, it goes down to a really small, like almost molecular level, right? In terms of how that shape gets presented. Can you talk a bit on that? I remember seeing that in a presentation when I was doing some research before I met with you, and you go through, how the shape presents itself in nature, and then how that connects with like sacred geometry and a lot of geometry and mathematical concepts that I'm pretty ignorant to, but are very interesting. And I'm sure you could shed a lot of light on if you're willing to while we're talking together.
Yeah, so that's a really, okay. Every time you ask a question, I say it's a really great question. I shouldn't say that. I'm trying not to say that. So
no
clearly, all of the portals use various geometries in their design. So because of that, I've gone on to do these lectures where I explain the geometries that I use and how they relate to the Earth's energy body. But I also then go into a little bit more detail about just sacred geometry or three-dimensional sacred geometry in general. They may not relate directly to the designs of the portals themselves. So there's kind of like a twofold question that you are answering there. And so I'll first start by just answering about the geometries that are used in the portal designs themselves. So we already were just mentioning, about like in the Sapphire portal, how I use this geometry called an icosahedron dodecahedron, which is both the 20 triangles of an icosahedron and the 12 triangles of a dodecahedron. Those are two of the 5 platonic solids, and that does relate to the Earth's energy body. There's another portal that then uses another slightly more complicated geometry that's called a rhombic triacontahedron, which are 30 rhombuses. And that's actually just one step removed from this icosahedron dodecahedron. So, I like to educate people on all of these underlying three-dimensional geometries so they can have an understanding of what they are, how they relate to the Earth's energy body, why, and how I'm then using them in the portal designs. So even going back to that cube that I used for the Emerald portal, well, a cube is a pretty simple geometry, but the way that I deconstructed the cube into the portal of the Emerald portal is there was a cube octahedron that then shows up in the center of that. And a cube octahedron is halfway between a cube and an octahedron. And that starts to show the relationship of the 90-degree grid of cubes to the 60-degree grid of the cube octahedron and the octahedron. And that's all octahedrons and tetrahedrons all use a 60-degree geometry. And that's something that comes up very much so in the work of Buckminster Fuller, who actually gave a name to the cube octahedron that when you connect all of its points in the center of a cube octahedron, it makes another shape that he calls a vector equilibrium. So I go into detail in my geometry lectures on that, and I show these various ways of depicting and understanding the order of space in three-dimensional geometry. So, for instance, this vector equilibrium, besides it being like this cube octahedron, which is both the 6 squares of a cube and the 8 triangles of an octahedron, and you can arrive at this shape by cutting off the corners of either of those two Platonic solids, the cube or octahedron, it also is generated by what Buckminster Fuller recognized as the closest packing of spheres. And so starting with just one sphere, and you start to put spheres around it like you see in a grocery store of oranges or apples stacked up, and in a plane, there's 6 more spheres that closest pack around it. And then in 3 dimensions, 3 more will pack below, 3 more will pack above it. And when you connect that central sphere to all of the spheres that are around it, it makes this vector equilibrium or cube octahedron. So it's kind of like how space really naturally wants to be ordered. The cubes and 90 degree that we're so used to in our current way of thinking is actually not the natural way that space defines itself. And so to see the relationship between the 60-degree grid and the 90-degree grid is one of the things I show off. And then we were step further to like completion, and it's called the 64 tetrahedron grid, or what the sim will call the structure of the vacuum. So I'll go into detail on how explaining the 64 tetrahedron grid, which is this combination of both a cube octahedron and a star tetrahedron that is actually fractal, so that if you half all of the struts, it makes the same shape half size, or double it, it makes the same shape going outward or inward, infinitely fractal. And this is actually what he understands to be the fabric of how space comes into being. And there's so many interesting corollaries to it. But the way he's explaining this, though, is it's at the Planck level. And Planck's units, which were discovered by this physicist back in 1899, Max Planck, they're trillions of times smaller than an atom. So a Planck's unit is to the size of an atom, as an atom is to the size of our body. It's so infinitesimally small. And that at that level, this is how space is organizing itself, but it's completely balancing itself out into a unified field that looks invisible. It's the vacuum. And there's so many corollaries in this 64 tetrahedron. Like the I Ching has 64 hexagrams, and a hexagram is made up of 6 lines, and a tetrahedron is made up of 6 lines. So there's like a 1-to-1 correspondence between the I Ching, the Chinese divination that kind of explains all of the universe through this divination, and this 64 tetrahedron grid. And another interesting corollary that which I came up with is I studied Tibetan Buddhism, and there's a heart sutra that's intended to connect you into your heart. And it starts off by saying, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And that is synonymous. The structure of the vacuum is the form of the emptiness. So it's by understanding this relationship of space is a key. It's not just like a science. It's like a key to connecting us spiritually to our very existence, to existing in time and space. So, I don't have any portals that actually are the structure of the vacuum. But so that it's like I said, this is the twofold answer. Yes, I use geometries in the designs of all my different portals. And yet I also like to be able to teach and explain how 3D geometry relates to, just being a human embodied here in time and space, and how it is a key to our evolution of consciousness.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it feels like just by inherently being a human, it feels like we're stuck in, this might be me not being opened up enough, but it almost feels like we're stuck in dualism to an extent by being a human being, because we're in this level of consciousness. But you could also argue that that's from programming, and that's from us being told that from the second we're born that we are dualistic creatures. But it seems like it's very deep in Western philosophy that we are dualistic creatures, that are. And that inevitably keeps us from transcending to that next level, because no matter what, we're still in these bodies. Does that resonate? So like, no matter what, we're still human beings in a dualistic plane. Though we can transcend on some levels, we're always going to be, having sins at one level of analysis. And it's just interesting because connecting to those higher frequencies allows us to connect with that oneness, which is coming back to everything. But it's almost like we become these separate entities, so that way the ground of being can experience itself as different manifestations of itself, if that makes sense, or manifestations of of the one?
Yes. So I've got a good answer to that. So first of all, we were talking about the structure of the vacuum, which is both a it's a fractal cube octahedron in that there's a half-size cube octahedron in the center and a double size around the outside. And then it's also a star tetrahedron in its outer form, but it's actually made of 8 smaller star tetrahedrons that all come together. And so a star tetrahedron is actually 8 tetrahedron all pointing out, and they're all radially connected at their center. A cube octahedron is 8 tetrahedrons pointing in, and they're concentrically nested like onion skins. And so your question has to do with the fact that here as humans, we're in a very dualistic reality. Mm-hmm. You know, they're good and bad, light and dark, all of these things. And that seems to lead to a lot of the problems that we have. War and peace, right? You know, of what's going on the earth. And so we're looking for a way to reconcile this duality. So the structure of the vacuum is a perfectly balanced reconciliation of the tetrahedron's outward radiating principle of space and the inward condensing, contracting form of space. So it's perfectly balanced in this form that the radiating principles of the star tetrahedron are balanced with the contracting principles of the cube octahedron. So it's a key to finding this reconciliation of duality. Mm-hmm. And so then in one of the portals, which I built in 2015, it was actually named the Reformation Portal. And the whole intention of that portal was to be able to create a space for this reconciliation of duality. And I actually I collaborated with another artist. So I created this space to be a container, and then she created these paper mache beings. And as you walked into the space, there was this wedding taking place between these representations of the goddess Sekhmet and the god Ptah. And Sekhmet being the goddess of destruction, and Ptah being the god of creation. And they're being married. So it's like a physical representation of this balancing of those the whole dualistic nature of reality. And the intention, though, of the entire space is for this reformation or reconciliation of duality in consciousness so that humanity can move ahead and heal to inhabit the planet in a balanced and sacred and harmonious way, as opposed to this like disconnected way where we're, still just so focused on like this negative, destructive way of inhabiting the earth, as opposed to a more harmonious way. And another way to look at it, and it's really interesting as a segue, there's this incredible scientist, Victor Schauberger, that talked about understanding the principles of how right now we're employing the explosive nature. All of our energy comes from like burning fossil fuels. Our cars, our jets are all about explosion, which is a very negative, explosive, and like a death, entropic, destructive way, things running down and burning, and our whole society is based on that's how we create our energy. That's how we move ourselves through space. And he was discovering this implosive way of nature that is actually the life-giving way, and that through water and cooling and vortexing inward is a way to be in harmony with life itself. And it's pretty difficult to actually explain. You can maybe intuitively kind of see it as the opposite, that it's syntropic or negentropic is the opposite of entropy, of things running down. And this nature, it's very life enhancing. And there's this really interesting, my favorite quote of Victor Schauberger is that, Newton is super famous for asking the question, how did the apple fall to the ground? And he kind of discovered this force of gravity and a way of understanding what gravity is. But Victor Schauberger says Einstein asked the wrong Einstein. Oh my God, I'm really messing up this. Newton asked the wrong question. The question they should have asked is, how did the apple get up there? And we just take for granted that a little tiny apple seed falls on the earth, and with just water, sun, and earth, this apple tree grows upwards to, 20 feet high. And then all this apple grows on the tree up in the air away from gravity. And eventually, when the apple is ripe, gravity will pull it and it'll fall to the ground. And yes, gravity is a very important and significant force of inwardly things being attracted, inwardly. But to go against gravity, the very essence of life itself, to be able to grow upwards and away from the earth, is one of the biggest mysteries. There is no answer to that we know at this time. We see it, we understand it as life, but it is the very essence of being aligned with the universe, being aligned with the force of nature or the force of God. I think in one of your questions you sent me, you used the word God. So maybe we'll segue into a little more esoteric or spiritual with this question. But yeah, it is about this duality and yes, aligning with life itself and understanding life.
Sure. And that question, the God one that I'd sent over to you, is it seems like your venture, the way I perceive it, it's bringing people closer to God or closer to that source. And then I saw, I personally kind of define God as the substrate of being and the source of all. And then I was wondering if we could discuss, our perspectives of God and higher consciousness and what that is, if there are planes to it. Because I feel like there's a lot in that, discussing that, especially in today's time period, because maybe I feel often people make associations when they hear the name God because they associate it with, bearded man in the sky or, years of religious genocides or crimes. And they don't necessarily maybe view it in the context that your work is trying to connect people to higher consciousness. I was wondering if we could maybe discuss that a bit and what higher consciousness is, how people can, we've talked about how people connect to it, discuss higher consciousness and, how it pertains to our lives.
Yep. Well, one of my favorite ways of defining God is like the Native Americans will call God great mystery. Mm-hmm. It's just completely unknowable. And you defined it very well, just the substrate of all being, everything that comes into being. It's the source of all. And it's not like charged with any kind of religious or even like spiritual overtones. It's just the very essence of creation that allows, creation to come into being, and it'll never be known. I mean, as much as you try to ascertain or apprehend it, it is the great mystery that is always beyond, as much as we, unravel it and try to understand it. And, so clearly in my work, I'm wanting to get people to come into touch and evolve their consciousness. And that definitely has something to do with, connecting inside to your own spirit, your own soul, into the source of all being, what you might call God. But, obviously when you use the word God, it has a lot of overtones that might connect to, this huge history of religion on earth, which is quite a touchy subject. Mm-hmm. And so, I have never really, embraced the religious doctrines too much. They've always seemed a little alien. And actually, when I was, just a kid is when Eric von Däniken wrote the book Chariots of the Gods. Mm-hmm. So it's a great segue. He used the word gods and God. And basically his premise is that ETs and UFOs were who claimed to be what we see as God in the Bible. And he's still lecturing. I've gone to see him lecture just a few years ago. And that's his whole thing, is basically taking the Bible, deconstructing it and saying, look, what they're saying in the Bible is straight up talking about ETs, spaceship, and interacting with humanity. And that has been basically my view of religion, that there is a major ET influence. But, we don't even need to go there. A lot of people I know are really interested in trying to make contact with ETs and spacecraft and all of these things. And I feel like that is almost a diversion, because we are the ETs. Humanity is a combination of all of the ETs throughout all of the universe. We're a DNA experiment. We are an interstellar war embodied in each of our own bodies itself. There's some people that talk about this. Alex Collier says that humanity is a combination of 22 interstellar ET races. And so, if I want to contact an ET, I'm not going to do a meditation and look up into the sky and hope that some craft comes and hovers over me or lands. I connected with someone that showed up a few years ago named Z, our healer. Her first name is spelled XI. She's Chinese, but she pronounced it Z. And she has a website, Earth Star Academy. And she has been working for the past about 8 or 9 years to integrate her higher dimensional, seventh dimensional Andromedan geneticist self. And she's fully conscious of that part of herself being extraterrestrial. And she's also fully conscious of being this, human embodied here on Earth at this time. And that's basically how this shift in evolution needs to take place. We're not going to wait for some ETs to land and bring us free energy and save us. We're here. We have to do it from the ground. We're the ground crew, awakening in our human bodies at this time to the fact that our DNA itself is a fully activated ET origin that we've been co-opted and shut down from, and they're doing a lot to shut us down. And even one of the portals I have is just a very simple octahedron. And envision a point below you, above you, in front of you, behind you, and to the right and to the left, that you then connect together, and that makes an octahedron around your body. And this octahedron is a way to activate your crystalline DNA, your 12-strand crystalline DNA. So by doing this meditation, you're able to actually tune in and activate your higher dimensional DNA programming, which is the key to waking up to, this higher dimensional aspect of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And to the higher dimensional aspects through coming in from source, from divinity or God itself, as we are. Each one of us as a human being is actually a divine sovereign source of God itself. And we have huge creative potential to do anything here on the earth, to create a reality. And we've been kind of co-opted and dumbed down to not realize how powerful creator, divine sovereign beings we are. So that's a big key of the intention of my portals and the work I'm doing is to assist, humans to wake up to that aspect of themselves.
Sure. And is it kind of like we hit in your opinion, we hit a critical space where we're more conscious and aware and attuned with our deeper selves, and then we radically change how we interact with the environment? Or does it look more, in your opinion, in people that do similar or within your circle? Is it kind of like a gradual change over time that we kind of change our cities and we change how we interact with our environment? Is it kind of a slow process, or does it seem like it's more going to be, massive change in how we view things, and we just change it exponentially, how we interact with our environments? Or is that even too intellectual of a question for the type of subject matter this is? Because I feel like it's so not in the intellect, it's more in the heart, and it's a process and connecting with our deeper selves. And that's not really something we think into existence. It's something we, cause to come into existence through how we, resonate with our environment.
So, I hope that our connection's good, because a bit of your question broke up, but I hope you'll be able to hear my response, because I heard enough of it that this concept, though, if you look historically of how humans have slowly evolved, and even the past 100 years has been very fast with the Industrial Revolution and technological revolution. But the idea is that this shift that's taking place will be extremely dramatic, like a light switch being turned on. And then we can dramatically shift our relationship and how we build and design with the earth very, very quickly in a huge, quick transformation. And it's not like it's going to take another 100 years and very slowly plodding along, and that there is going to be this huge wave that we're building up to, that will be a mass awakening of the majority of humanity, and also a mass shift of this negative mind control being lifted and done away with. And time will tell. From where we still are right now here in the spring of two, it still seems like it may be a very, very slow road, although we do start to see little by little some kind of shift and awakening happening more and more. But that's been a real crux. And, I've been dealing with this my whole life of wanting to see the shift take place. Like even back in 1987, when the harmonic convergence happened, I was ready for this awakening of consciousness. And I'm just so aligned with, seeing humanity it's really interesting because every time I throw out any garbage, I'm totally aligned with this doesn't make sense. Plastic garbage. I try to bury all of my I try to not buy packaging that is plastic packaging that has to be thrown out. I try to recycle everything I do. But this new earth, this shit, it may be a segue. I remember one of your questions is, what is this new earth and how does it compare to the old earth? So I'm starting to answer that. In the new earth, we're not going to have plastic garbage. And, it's funny, sometimes people say, well, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from the planet of plastic garbage. And it's just so weird how we produce so much plastic garbage. The new earth will not be a planet of plastic garbage. It'll be where every single item that we make and produce and, everything that we throw out will be done consciously. It'll all be in accordance with life and nature and consciousness. And we won't have, a lot of these things that are kind of stupid and detrimental.
Right. Sounds like it'll be a more efficient world and getting, I guess, efficient and loving. Can you kind of talk a bit to you mentioned the plastic bit, but in general, what does the new world look like as opposed to the old world? What are we moving into? What would people expect? What can they be excited about if they're, locked into this and they're tired of what's going on in the world right now and they're overwhelmed by things? What does that new world look like?
Right. Well, one of the biggest keys to it is, from my sense, since it's also very heart-based and not mind-based, and the mind is kind of like the artificial intelligence, and there is artificial intelligence that exists in the universe outside of the type of computers and things that we're doing that is AI, and that's a lot of what has to do with this mind control. But coming into the heart and the way that life itself is organic. So I see the new earth more and naturally based, and that the majority of what we as humans inhabiting the earth will be experiencing will be very simple and beautiful with plants and nature and animals, and will make environments that are conducive to all kinds of animals and plants and nature to be thriving in the most beautiful way possible. Think of the most beautiful gardens you've ever seen, or think of the coral reefs under the ocean that are just so magical with all the colors. We can make every inch of the earth be thriving with life and heart and organic nature. The technological part, our cell phones, our computers, the AI, that can definitely serve a function. It'll be extremely minimal, just like the way that the nerves in our body and the brain in our body serve in a way to help make the body function, but it's not the main focus of it. And so these new earth aspect will become extremely refined and extremely minimal. It's almost in a way like our technology is a form of training wheels for our psychic abilities. And we won't need to have the cell phones and the technology and the microchips, because if you think about it, what do we do with all of our cell phones and computers? We're just putting content into it. We're putting sounds, music, talking, images. Those are why we have them. We're conveying concepts, ideas, information, and all of that could be done on a conscious level telepathically. And so we're evolving, and we need to, I see, evolve away from being a slave to this technology and just be focusing more on the content that we're communicating. I had this amazing intuition reading this book, this incredible author, Timothy Wiley, called Dolphins, ETs, and Angels, Meetings with Spiritual Intelligences. He was tuning into dolphins being these extremely evolved conscious entities here on the earth. And he didn't mention this in the book, but as I'm reading and tuning into it, I got this idea that dolphins are so highly evolved that they're intelligent in a way that it's difficult to understand from human intelligence. Human intelligence, we build these computers and these vehicles and technologies with our hands. Dolphins obviously don't have hands, but they have extremely advanced minds. And they are actually using their minds to manipulate external reality through their psychic abilities. And I had this vision that sand dollars were actually these CDs or DVDs that they project holographic information into that can be recorded by one dolphin, and another dolphin comes along and with his mind can then read back the information that's stored in that. But I also saw that the coral reefs and all the beautiful tropical fish, was that just natural evolution, or was there some kind of beings that helped to evolve all of that? And I had the sense that dolphins were responsible a lot for the way that all of that is evolved. And more importantly than dolphins are whales. And that whales, through their songs, through their consciousness, they are actually these keys to singing all of life on planet Earth into being. And if through humans, we can actually interact through whale consciousness and get a glimpse and understand that whales are these unbelievably deep cosmic beings that are here on Earth through their consciousness and through their presence and through the sounds that they sing into the ocean, that they're on that planet itself. And that's something that we'll learn to do as evolved humans to create this beautiful new Earth. We don't need to go out there and do it technologically and through 3D physical manipulation. We can start to do it through higher dimensional understanding of how nature comes into being from that form. And there's great teachers, the cetaceans, dolphins, and whales, to see that that is a way that you can interact and with the evolution of our physical environment.
And do you think that over-reliance on technology will ultimately lead to destruction of our current environment?
So there's a bifurcation taking place. And we've all seen, or most people know about the Terminator movies and seeing that road of going down. And even in the Matrix movies, we see this world that's machine dominated and AI dominated and is heartless. And we see the way as humanity right now is very heartless. The way we raise animals, the way we raise crops, the way we mine of all of the various minerals and things is done in a heartless way. So it seems like there's a choice taking place, a bifurcation, a split. And this world of artificial intelligence and war and destruction and control can continue to evolve. You know, it's kind of like the transhumanist agenda of taking human consciousness and putting it into machines. And if you just look at, the military and industrial complex is so advanced. We spend the most of money of military livingry, but at some point we don't even have to teach an organic work. Get the sense, though, that there's a split taking place, and that you could stick on technology and high tech and artificial intelligence and go down that path, or you can stick on the heart-based path of organic-based and simple, the beauty way. That's one of the teachings I have in my Native American spiritual practice is called the beauty way. Is this the most beautiful way? Is this the heart and sacred way that benefits all of life? So it does seem to be a polarized split, this duality. And, it's kind of hard to imagine the earth splitting, but we see it in other things. And it seems like we're at the verge of this split right now. And we do have a choice.
It's a tense time, Harlan. I feel that feels tense, with that split and all that going on within this time period, it's a lot. Back to the duality thing too, because you were talking about how dolphins are this harbor for like these higher consciousness and entities, but at the same token, I've heard stories of dolphins like chasing down female dolphins and raping them. Is that just kind of part of, where does that meet? If it's a higher conscious entity doing that,
And
is that just they're subjected to the same things as us?
Right. We're in 3D polarity. And and even with humans, sometimes dolphins, there's lots of stories of dolphins saving people from drowning, shipwrecks, this and that. And dolphins, interacting with humans in a super high vibe positive way. And there's also encounters where the dolphins are aggressive and negative. And like you just mentioned, with other dolphins or even with humanity. And even like people will take the example, though, of just in nature, sharks kill other things. Lions are hunting and killing things. That we're in duality. There is always this negative violence taking place. But that's because that is the 3D world that we're enmeshed in. And yes, my answer would be, and I think you were kind of alluding to it, that's just because we are so much manifesting a very polarized 3D reality that has violence and negativity in it. And so, sure, dolphins are going to embody that at a certain level too. But for the most part, all the people that interact and research and work with dolphins, they do get a much more higher sense of consciousness taking place. But yes, we are clearly immersed in the world of duality, and we're going to see that. And so we'll always be able to justify duality. If you're going to want to look at it, right now, you look at the whole, what's going on in the world, and both sides can be clearly justified and to be valid and truthful, that there's this disease and you need to be vaccinated and it's science and that's the truth. And other people are going to be like, oh, wait a second, it seems to be something that's been created and that we are divine sovereign beings and we don't need any kind of medicines or vaccinations to be able to be immune. And when you look at either side of it, they both have perfectly valid arguments. And so in some ways, it's a paradox. There's two different truths and realities taking place. And so you have, it gets to be a little confusing then if there's, you don't know what is true anymore.
Yeah. I think isn't paradox like a expression of maybe even higher truth at that point though? Because it's showing that something's true at two levels. One thing's right at one level, one thing's right at another level, and they're both kind of simultaneously right. But then it kind of shows the limitation of living in 3D. Is that kind of maybe the point of it, or even living in 4D? I'm kind of trying to explore this with you. Is that kind of the beauty of paradoxes at that point? As it says, the intellect can't make sense of this, so we have to fall into the heart at that point. Is that kind of the space at that point?
So it seems like, right now, for the most part, humanity is in a 3D kind of consciousness. And that's where this paradox then arises. And, I've actually been working and following very closely this woman named Lisa Renee, who has a website, Energetic Synthesis. And I was just listening to her latest podcast newsletter, where she's talking a lot about she uses the word truth. Now, I like to be very grounded in the 3D reality to understand both sides equally. But it seems that once your consciousness is evolving and perceiving reality from higher dimensions, that there is more of one ultimate truth and reality. And then it's only when you've fallen into a lower 3D consciousness that you start to see these other what appears to be truths, but are not really truths. So I think it is possible to transcend the paradox and get to a more ultimate truth and reality. But you really have to be grounded and in these higher dimensions. And if you're not, then you'll, and when you're in the lower dimensions, you can't see the higher dimensions. And so it doesn't seem like there's any truth to that. So when you're locked into the lower dimensions and you're espousing what you see to be absolute truths, and someone is maybe trying to point out or argue from this higher dimension, but if you can't see that higher dimension, it will be an invalid. You'll just be called a conspiracy theorist and some new age woohoo crackpot. And so there's no real way to then crack through that lower dimensional mind control reality at this point. It seems to be happening naturally for people little by little here and there, more and more people. But no, it's a real issue right now. It's a real conundrum that we're being faced with. But as I was listening to Lisa Renee's thing, I'm trying to look at it from the perspective that someone who doesn't understand it from her perspective. And she keeps talking about these certain truths. And yet, if you don't see it as truth, it's quite the difficult thing to ascertain. And yet, that's what we're confronted with right now in this evolution that's taking place. And so there's no real answer.
Yeah. Well, it feels like there's a lot of fear around it too. Fear when these topics even come up, or like you were saying, fear if something's brought up that's different from the story that we've been told culturally our whole lives. And if that pops up, even if maybe intuitively we feel like something's wrong or off, if we're told something that seems a little too far off from what we've been told our whole lives, and there's a defensive reaction to it. And then there's fear maybe, and it's tricky space, because people, I think there's that vulnerability and there's that, weak fear of being like attacked or being weak, or and then just everything, people start closing up, which maybe even feeds right into how we're kind of given comforts in our current society to feel okay, or we get advertised certain things that make us feel okay about ourselves, or we go off into our own little cells, kind of like I brought up on that question list I sent you, where it's like we have our cell in our life, and we have our space we go into, and we go make our money, and then we come back and we get the things that give us peace and joy, so we don't have to think about anything or wake up. And then that becomes like the wheel that keeps turning, and it seems like that's the wheel that's been turning for a couple thousand years at this point, or at least 2,000 years, past long time. That's been what's going on. And it's a little freaky. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little scary. It's like, what do you do with that? Can we move to a different type of living? And it seems like your project is to help people to raise their level of awareness, so that way they can have a map in their head as to what that new reality could look like. And it's not even fully in their head, it's in their being. But what would you recommend to like the, standard 20-year-old or 20-something-year-old who feels disenchanted with their life, but is a little afraid of when they're hearing dodecahedrons and hedrons and all these shapes, and it's just a little overwhelming for them, but they do feel disenchanted and maybe upset with the current society as is. What do you, if you could look back with empathy, or look at empathy with that, to that individual, kind of how would you extend a hand to that person through your work, or through your voice, or through your philosophy, or your book, or your podcast? What do you feel is a good way to bridge that gap and kind of cut out that fear? Because it feels like there's a whole lot of fear in our culture as of now.
Yep. And you just brought up the word fear and mentioned it many times in your question. And it's the first time it came up in our conversation today. And yet it really is a crux of the whole issue taking place. And I guess the opposite of fear would be love, and not being afraid. And yes, fear is the key to the whole control paradigm that we're in. And it's true. I've been, on this mission to share these installations, at Burning Man, at the few festivals I go to, but it's not reaching that many people. So now, I'm working on writing this book that explains the story of it, explains, the underlying principles that I use about understanding how sound is like the cornerstone of creation, and the earth has a energy grid and these various geometries I use. So yes, how can someone, right now that's being confronted with the issue of, our whole world being co-opted and being controlled by fear, and what steps can we take to move ahead and get ourselves out of that control paradigm and start to build this new earth together? And man, that is not an easy question that I can even answer at all, but it's such, that's where we're at right now. What can I possibly do? And that is my mission here as a human, embodied on earth at this time, is to help people align with their true divine sovereignty inside and break out of the control and fear paradigm and connect to their higher dimensional self, activate their 12-strand crystalline DNA, see themselves as being a fully empowered divine sovereign being. And what's happening is now there's been more and more lockdowns around the world to kind of control us through fear, between the whole COVID and the vaccine and now this war. Russia is bad. We have to help Ukraine and all this fear-based things. And especially though I'm hearing now more and more laws are being passed that, make things controlled. And once we come to the point that we realize that we don't need, these governments and this control paradigm, if we all just stand up to our own awakened divine sovereignty and understand that, as a human being, we are such powerful beings and that we can work together, not through a hierarchical control structure of government, but just all work together through spontaneous cooperation. And just, it's like life itself waking up through the planet itself. One of my favorite books that I read back in 1984, it came out then, called The Starseed Transmissions by Ken Carey, is about, and it was Pleiadian information being channeled. And it looks at life, and the earth itself is just waking up from the inside out, that like God itself, spirit itself, is coming through the earth, and that the entire earth, Gaia itself, Mother Nature, Gaia, wakes up through humanity, that we each become these organisms and cells of this greater body of Mother Earth to all live together in love and light and harmony and peace and beauty. And that this just and it's simple. We don't have to do anything. We just have to quiet the mind, sink into the heart, connect to the source of all life itself. You don't need to study these geometries. You don't need to, learn and intellectualize any of this stuff. You just can go directly to source. Once you do, then when you do study these geometries, you can apply it to what you're seeing and feeling and understanding through your heart. But most importantly is just the stilling and quieting of the mind, going into your heart and going into the heart of the earth, like doing a meditation, where you connect to the earth and you connect to the higher dimensions. A lot of times when I give a lecture on my work, and I learned this when I went to Australia in 2012, and I built my turquoise portal there, and I saw someone else give a talk at one of the festivals. He did this little meditation, and ever since then, whenever I give a talk, I give a little guided meditation where, starting from the heart, you send your energy down through your chakras and down to the center of the earth, and you connect to the earth, and you feel the earth respond to your consciousness, and then you bring that energy back up into your heart, and then you spiral it up through your crown, and you spiral it through the center of the sun, through the center of the galaxy, and you spiral all the way to the highest, what you can conceive of the highest 12th dimension center of all source being. And you connect to that, and you feel it respond, and then you bring that energy back down into your heart, and then you just sit and you breathe, and you feel your connection to the earth, you feel your connection to the source of all creation. So doing simple things like that is probably the best key. And, I need to do that more myself. I am also caught up in my mind, and I get caught up in fear and confusion and easily, and it keeps me from functioning as well as I possibly can. So I can easily relate to other people that are feeling those, being stuck and in fear and confusion. And yes, being able to then connect and meditate like that would be the simplest and best answer I could give, even though I'm not very adept at it myself.
Yeah, I feel like there's something to being gentle with ourselves too, even if we're not always doing the practices, or if we're making mistakes, or we feel afraid. And then it's almost like that voice of a loving mother at that point that just goes it's all good. It's okay. It's still good regardless. And then being able to reset and reconnect and connect into the earth, and then go deeper, and then go into our hearts, and then connect to, being as is, which you very, beautifully put, how far we really can expand with our awareness and, our consciousness and our hearts. But
And so I'm in this Buckminster Fuller Institute's Design Science Studio for the past 2 years, and I host every Friday morning a New Earth Visioning Zoom meeting, just to have people come together and just talk about positive visions of what the new Earth is. And then I've also been following this sound healer named Tom Kenyon for many years. And he produced a meditation called The Sphere of All Possibilities. It's on his website, tomkenyon.com, under the Hathor archives. So he channels these higher dimensional beings named the Hathors, and they share various different meditations over the years. And the Sphere of All Possibilities is just a very simple meditation where you picture your future self in this new Earth realm, and then you picture your present self now, and you picture yourself at the center of a sphere that encompasses the entire universe, and it's so big that anything is possible. And then you could just choose this and see this perfect, beautiful, sacred new Earth, and you see points of light coming from the sphere of this immensely huge sphere into your solar plexus, and you beam it forward into your future self to create this new reality. So just by doing simple things like this, simple meditations of just knowing this new Earth is coming into being and seeing it, and just projecting consciousness and energy into it, and putting your time and energy into visioning the new Earth. It's as simple as that. And don't put your attention on the old Earth. It's important to know that there's a lot of negativity and control taking place. But if you're spending all your time listening to stories of all this horrible negativity and control, it's good to wake up to it. But at some point you get the message and hang up. Don't even think about it or talk about it. Just start creating and talking about the positive new Earth. And that's really important. That's one of the things.
Do you feel like it's because it feeds it at that point? It feeds.
Absolutely.
Focus too much on it, and then
it's totally feeding it. Even if it's even if you're like looking at this negativity in a way to try to stop it, or see it as being bad, if you keep talking about it, you're feeding it. You're making it reality. That's your reality. You're looking at this control paradigm, this negative, cabal, Illuminati, draconian, negative aliens running the show, and you're empowering them, even though you're trying to take them down and be pointing at them. Look at what they're doing. Look at what they're doing. They're so bad. They're so evil. They're so controlling. It's like once you do it, stop. It's it's really interesting that even if you're trying to confront negativity, if you do it a lot, you're actually empowering it. And so see it, understand it. And Magenta Pixie gave a great 3-step process for creating this new Earth. One, you got to recognize that there is this control paradigm. This is not just human nature and natural evolution. There is an agenda taking place for thousands and thousands of years that has kind of co-opted and controlled humanity. Once you wake up to that perspective and see it, then 2, just say, I don't consent. I do not consent to this control paradigm, which isn't easy to do, to break free of it and start to live in a way that's free of it. But then the third one, which is actually the hardest of all of them, we have to love them, and we don't want to fight them. If you want to destroy them, if you're like, I'm going to kill them, they've been doing such bad stuff and we're going to lock them up or kill them or get rid of them, you're playing their game. You're in duality. You're wanting to do what they're doing also. We have to see them as our dark teachers. It's like the bad guy in a movie. You can't identify them as actually the bad guy. They're just source. They're just God itself that's been disconnected and is feeding off of this negativity. But they're just playing this dark teacher, this role to awaken us. And we have to love them. We're all transitioning together through love. And so we have to love the dark teachers. We have to love this negativity, the darkness, the shadow, and bring light to it. We're bringing light to the shadows. And that's the third step to this reconciliation, this reformation, this evolution taking place, is waking up that it's all love. God is ultimately just love. And the fear, the darkness, the shadow, the awfulness is just the absence of the love. But the love and the light and the peace and the beauty and God and sacredness is the ultimate truth to all reality. And it's kind of, they hate that. If you recognize them and then want to destroy them, they love that. But if you recognize them and you believe like, I love you, we want to just heal you, we see you're disconnected from source, that's like, oh my God, they just can't stand that, to be have the light shown on them and the love shown on them. So these are really the keys. It can be very empowering for people that are starting to wake up to get these very simple things can actually help for this transition to take place very quickly. I really see, that we're going to transform the earth in the most magical, sacred, powerful, beautiful way very, very quickly. It's like a scale, we've been locked down and now we're being putting little by little by little, but the way the scale works is you just put one more featherweight and the whole thing tips. Boom, like turning on the light switch. And we're getting I think, it feels like we're getting close to the scales tipping. What do you think?
Well, it's almost like we hit like a tipping point, right? And I think that shows itself in nature a lot, but you hit like a critical mass or a tipping point, and then there's a phase change. But maybe that's just like that, except for, a number of conscious individuals that with a certain level of awareness around things and they're in relationship with themselves and the environment. Once you hit like a critical mass of people that start thinking like that and truly, not being caught up in things that typically keep us in the rut we've been in for a while, then I feel like there would be a massive change in how we, interact with each other, how we run our societies, how we interact with different countries, how we act as a global race, global race of human beings. I think it'll change at that point because it'll change our perception of reality. However, I feel like there are many people kind of caught up, like we were talking about, in fear and anger. And I think sometimes that's amplified by how all the stuff you've talked about, but by, how our media is structured, how there's that control paradigm that you were talking about. But as you eloquently put, maybe waking people up, but then encouraging them to rest in love as opposed to emphasizing how effed up things are as a better way of going about it. And that gives me hope. Seeing that, we reach a critical mass of people that are locked into that loving awareness, and then we're all going to kind of reorient their perspective of how they want our human existence to be, and then allow us to change our world, which would be fantastic. I think that answered, I think that gave my opinion. I kind of tangented it, but
it's true. But an interesting part of this, though, is that there's a certain addiction to that negativity, that keeps it going. And there's a certain faction of humanity that is fully addicted and aligned with that. And they wouldn't even like a world of love and peace. They like of negativity and strife and conflict. And it is quite addictive. And when you look at it from the higher perspective, that it's just God wanting to experience itself. And God wants to experience everything, both sides of the coin. And that's why we are in the conundrum and this, super negative, dark thing, is because there is a certain level of experience that does want to happen. And so, and maybe that's part of this split we were talking about earlier, that a certain faction that is addicted to the shadow, the negativity, the fear, and wants to keep playing that out, they can stay on that path and keep going down that road. And then for the people that are done with it and want to live in a much more beautiful, sustainable, harmonious, sacred world, we can all go there. And there's a choice that could be aligned with and taken place. So it's not either or, but, we'll be able to, move ahead with both happening, and you can make your choice. That seems to be almost a more realistic answer, because, why force all of these beings that are aligned with negativity and shadow and fear and death and destruction to have to live in a world that it's all beautiful, love, light, and peace, Right. That's not what they're about. If they want to experience it, they should have the option to continue and exist in a realm that allows that. But, that is the realm we're in. That's what Earth is all about right now, this duality and the ability to go down. I don't really want to talk much about, I mentioned the word satanic ritual abuse, and that's, I think, all that I want to say about it, but I do listen to a lot of people that go into the details as to what that actually entails. The whole pedophilia and, child trafficking and things that are happening here on the earth, that's hand in hand with, military industrial complex and control and all of those things. And that's, being allowed, that's being embodied here in 3D form. But I think we've gone down that path far enough, and we're about to shift, and it's going to be amazing. My visions, and that's actually what we should shift to wrap our conversation up, are my visions of what is this new earth. And I have, in my, I've been thinking about this thing called the 12 spiral city, which is a 3-dimensional megastructure city that grows over time like a living organism with these giant spiraling ramps that are just filled with pedestrian vehicles of like bikes and scooters and little, human scale vehicles that move at human scales, and not, cars that are zipping around, on big streets. And the whole city itself is all just integrated. It's based on Paolo Solari's concept of arcology, which is architecture and ecology integrated. And he talks about complexity miniaturization, that organisms, when they evolve, become more complex and miniaturized. And so that's how I see our cities and our villages being able to grow in these most beautiful, organic, very complex, miniaturized, where we have, all of human culture, all of our restaurants and galleries and music and everything that we love about, cities, all being condensed even richer and more, culturally amazing. And then if it's not in these giant megastructure cities, just the way we can go into nature and build a village. And after all, I lived in New York City most of my life, and I lived in the East Village. And if cities are just made of villages, it's just a clustering of many villages. And so if you want to build a future city, you don't build an entire city. You just start with a village. And the village should be integrated in the most beautiful, harmonious way. And we see the earth, and we see water, and we see how they can be integrated to create all of life. And so this sacred recognition of water and the earth and the integration of them to make our villages is what I call terraquaforming. And so just each little step it's just made up of little steps in understanding our relationship to life itself and the earth itself, to how we can then design and build the most beautiful, magical, sacred environments that we just wake up in the morning and walk outside, and it's just, amazing gardens, amazing pathways, and just, you don't hear sirens and cars rushing by. You hear children laughing and birds singing, and it's just filled with, all the most positivity we could possibly see. And walking down earthen paths to the village centers that are just filled with, the most beautiful life that you could imagine. We could do it. It's just a matter of choice.
Yeah.
We just have to align with that and make that choice. That's how we create and design and build our world all together in like magical co-creation, in synchronicity, in synergetic combination of everything that we do. Synergy meaning that the whole is unpredicted by the parts. And as we come together synergetically, we can't even conceive of how amazing this world is going to look like. And it's going to happen so quickly. And we're on the verge of it. And that's what I'm all about.
Right on. So what projects do you have coming up, Harlan, and where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? What's coming up on the horizon for you with your Portal to the New Earth projects, and how can people connect with you, support you, get involved?
Well, the book that I'm writing for the past 4 years is ready to be published, and I'm working on getting it printed right now. So imminently, you'll be able to buy this book either as a beautiful hardcover copy or a print-on-demand softcover, or as an ebook. And it's just taking longer than I expected, but I would say within this year, that will be available. Also, as I mentioned, I'm working on my own podcasts and interviews on a YouTube channel called Portal to the New Earth, and there'll be podcast channels, Portal to the New Earth. So all of this is imminently about to launch, and I'll be interviewing all kinds of other people, plus going into detail on all the stories of the various portals and all of these ideas, explaining everything in, a whole series of talks. So those are two big things. Let's see, a third one is to Burning Man was canceled the last 2 years, but they made virtual burns. And at first I thought, my portals really need to be experienced in 3D. But then I realized, no, virtual portals work quite well. And they did model some of them. And I'm actually working on launching virtual portal experiences so that you and your friends anywhere in the world can all decide to meet inside of one of my portals virtually and have an experience virtually. And there is something to be said for virtual reality. It's not my ultimate end-all goal, but it is a powerful tool that can be utilized in an efficient way. But also to that end, that I'd love to see these virtual city environments, this 12-spiral city I talked about, being able to be created virtually, and people could design and build an experiment with what it'll look like virtually before we actually start to build it. So that's and I don't have any virtual reality skills. I need to up my game or find people to work with. So if anyone's listening to this wants to collaborate, I'm open to creating some virtual portals or virtual future. Then I mentioned for Burning Man, I'm actually building a new portal in collaboration with a South African intuitive healer named Maria called the Interdimensional Space-Time Portal. And so that should be out at Burning Man from there. So yeah, I am working on building this new portal installation called the Interdimensional Space-Time Portal. That's actually a collaboration with a South African intuitive healer named Maria, where she actually came up with the vision of these arches and rings that surround a 12-step pyramid that can be gone inside of, and there'll be sounds inside that she'll be bringing forth. And this is to heal the timelines and help facilitate this shift taking place. And then, I'm also working on building some of my other previous portal designs, making them available for purchase, or other portal designs that I've thought of that haven't been built yet. So that's and a big part of, what I'm working on doing. So I've got a lot on my plate. And as
Harlan? We made it though. We hope you all enjoyed the show. If you want to connect with more of Harlan's work, you can do so via the link in the description. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and follow us. We love to see the DJ Coffee Talk family grow, and we do not function without your support. But you can also follow us on all socials. You can find us at our handle at DJ Coffee Talk Podcast. Love you all, and stay caffeinated.